My son slid a pen across the table and told me the diner was dying. 40 years my husband and I spent building that place, and now Brian sat in the very booth where his father proposed to me, and said it was time to let it go. Just sign the papers, Mom. A renovation loan. Boring legal stuff. You don't even need to read it. But I read it. That night, alone at my kitchen table, with my husband's old magnifying glass. And buried in the small print, where a tired old woman would never look, was a single line that had nothing to do with renovations. Transfer of title to the purchaser. He wasn't fixing up my diner. He was selling it. The whole building, the land, the corner, to a developer, for more money than I'd ever seen. And all he needed to make it happen was the one thing he was so sure I'd give him without looking. My signature. My son told me the diner was dying. And he said it while sitting in the very booth where his father proposed to me. Brian came by on a Tuesday afternoon, between the lunch rush and the early supper crowd. He slid into the corner booth with a folder under his arm and that gentle voice he uses when he's about to tell you something he's already decided. Mom, he said. We need to talk about Marsh's. The numbers just aren't there anymore. People don't come to old diners like they used to. I think it's time we let it go. I sat down across from him. In the booth by the window, where Walter got down on one knee in 1974. And I felt something cold move through me. For 40 years I had stood behind that counter. Walter and I opened Marsh's diner the year after we married, with a loan we were terrified of and a coffee urn we bought secondhand. We raised Brian in the back booth, with crayons and grilled cheese. When Walter died 5 years ago, I kept it open. Because it was the last place I could still hear his voice. The smell of the griddle in the morning is the closest thing I have left to him. And now my son was telling me it was over. Let me just handle everything, Brian said, opening the folder. There's some paperwork for a renovation loan and refinancing. Just to wind things down properly. Sign these, and you won't have to worry about any of it. I'll take care of you, Mom. You've worked long enough. He uncapped a pen and set it on top of the papers. He smiled at me. And I almost reached for it. I almost did. Because he's my son. And I am tired. And it is the easiest thing in the world to let the person you love most do your thinking for you. But I looked down at those papers, and something stopped my hand. They didn't look like renovation papers. They were thick. There was small print, the kind that crawls across the page in rows. And at the top of one page, before Brian slid another over it, I saw a word that had nothing to do with fixing up a diner. The word was purchaser. Let me read these later, honey, I said. And I kept my voice light. My eyes are tired today. And for just a second, before he smiled again, my son's face went tight in a way I had never seen before. I want to tell you I knew right then. I didn't. I told myself I was being a foolish old woman. Suspicious for no reason. Brian had run the diner's books for 3 years now, since my knees got bad and I stepped back. He handled the vendors, the payroll, the bank. If he said it was failing, who was I to argue? I never went to college. He did. But I have stood behind a counter for 40 years. And a counter teaches you to watch people. Over the next few days, the things I watched stopped adding up. The first was the diner itself. If Marsh's was dying, nobody had told the customers. That whole week the booths were full. The regulars came in for their eggs and their gossip, the way they had for decades. On Thursday we ran out of pie by 2 o'clock. I stood by the register and watched the lunch rush fill every stool, and I thought, this is failing? This? Marcus saw me thinking it. Marcus has cooked on that griddle for 20 years, since he was a young man. He loved Walter like a father. He came out of the kitchen wiping his hands and said quietly, "Best lunch we've had in months, Miss Lillian. I don't know what Brian's looking at. But it isn't these tables." I told him Brian said business was bad. Marcus didn't say anything. He just looked at me for a long moment. Then he looked away. And that silence told me more than any words could have. The second thing was the man on the sidewalk. Brian had told me, more than once, that nobody wanted an old diner anymore. But that Friday afternoon, there was a man standing on the corner outside our front window. Well-dressed. Expensive shoes. A phone in his hand. And he wasn't waiting for anyone. He was looking at our building. He paced the length of the lot, slow, measuring it with his eyes. He took photographs of the corner, of the street, of the parking. He looked up at the second floor and down at the foundation, like a man pricing a house he meant to buy. Nobody wants an old diner. But somebody wanted that corner. I watched him from behind the register until he left. And when I turned around, Marcus was standing in the kitchen doorway, watching too. "Miss Lillian," he said, low. "I've seen that fella before. Out back, by the dumpsters. Talking with Brian. Twice now. They stopped when they saw me." That night, I did not return the signed papers to Brian. I told him my eyes had been bothering me, and I hadn't gotten to them. He said, a little too quickly, that there was no rush. But that the renovation loan had a deadline, so not to wait too long. And then he said, "You don't need to read all of it, Mom. It's just boring legal stuff. I already went through it. It's just boring legal stuff. You don't need to read it." That was the sentence that decided me. Because in 40 years of running a business, I have learned one thing. When somebody tells you that you don't need to read something before you sign it, that is the exact moment you need to read every single word. So I did. That night, at my kitchen table, with Walter's old magnifying glass that still smelled faintly of his pipe, I read the papers my son wanted me to sign. All of them. Slowly. It took me until almost midnight. And the truth was in there. Buried where a tired woman would never look. Page after page of what they called renovation terms and refinancing language. And then, deep in the middle, one line in that crawling small print. Transfer of title and premises to the purchaser, free and clear. Transfer of title. They weren't renovating my diner. They were selling it. The whole building. The land. The corner. And a few pages later, I found the name of the purchaser. Hargrove Development. And next to it, a number. I had to read that number 3 times. It was more money than I had ever seen written down in my life. More than Walter and I made in all our 40 years together. That was the price of the diner my son had looked me in the eye and called worthless. And there, on the last page, was the signature line. My name typed beneath it. And stuck to the paper, a little arrow sticker. The kind you use to show someone where to sign. In Brian's handwriting, it said, "Sign here, Mom." He needed my name. That was the whole thing, you see. That was why the gentle voice. The tired mom talk. The boring legal stuff. The whole building, the whole deal, the whole fortune, all of it waited on one signature. Mine. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time. I did not cry, though I thought I might. Mostly I felt very still. And very clear. The way the air gets clear right before a storm. My boy. The baby I nursed in the back booth. He was going to sell his father's diner out from under me. And he was going to do it by tricking me into signing my own name to it. The pressure started the next morning. And now that I was awake to it, I could see it for what it was. Brian called before I'd even had my coffee. Had I signed yet? The loan deadline was coming. He didn't want me to lose the good terms. When I said I was still reading, he sighed, and there was an edge in it. Mom, come on. I've handled all of this. You're making it harder than it needs to be. Stephanie came by that afternoon. My daughter-in-law, with her bright tight smile. She just wanted to check on me. She said, gently, that she worried about me being all alone with so much responsibility. That maybe it was all getting to be too much for me. That maybe I wasn't quite able to keep track of things the way I used to. Nobody would blame you, Lillian, she said, patting my hand. You've earned a rest. They were building a story. The same way you'd frame a house. The diner is failing. The old woman can't manage anymore. And isn't it a mercy that her good son is handling it? Once I signed, that story would be the only one left. Because the diner would be gone, and the money would be theirs, and who would ever know? Then Brian called again. He'd arranged for a notary to come to my house on Friday. To make it official, he said. Easier than you coming downtown. We'll all be there. It'll be quick. Friday. He had given me a deadline of Friday to sign away the thing Walter and I spent our lives building. So I stopped waiting. And I started moving. I couldn't do it alone. And there was only one person in that family I trusted now. My granddaughter, Chloe. She's 20. Brian and Stephanie's girl. She's worked the diner counter through college, because she loves the place the way I do. I asked her to come by, and I showed her the papers, and I watched her young face change as she read the line about the transfer of title. Grandma, she whispered. This says they're selling it. Dad told me you wanted to retire. He said it was your idea. It was never my idea, sweetheart, I said. I didn't even know. Chloe was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I can help you. I know how to find things. Let me help. Over the next 2 days, that girl and I did more detective work than I ever thought I had in me. Chloe helped me call Hargrove Development. I played the part of a confused old owner just confirming the details. And the young man on the phone cheerfully told me everything. The sale was real. It was advanced. The closing was scheduled. And it would happen the moment the owner signed. He even said, your son's been great to work with, Mrs. Marsh. Very motivated to close quickly. Very motivated. Yes. I imagined he was. And then I did the thing I should have done first. I went to see Walter's old attorney. The firm that handled things when we set the business up, all those years ago. A kind woman named Ms. Reyes pulled our file. And what she told me changed everything. Mrs. Marsh, she said. Your husband structured this very carefully. The diner and the land are in your name alone. Not your son's. And the title is set up so it cannot be sold, transferred, or borrowed against without your own notarized signature. Nobody can sell this property but you. Has anything been signed? No, I said. Nothing. Not yet. She actually smiled. Then there is nothing to undo. As long as you don't sign, there is no sale. Your husband made sure of that. Oh, Walter. Even gone, you were still protecting me. He must have known, somehow, the way husbands know things, that one day someone might try. And he built a wall around the diner, with my name as the only gate. The very thing Brian needed, my signature, was the one thing in the world he could not get without me handing it over. That was the moment the fear left me, for good. They needed me. They had built their whole scheme on the idea that I was too trusting, and too tired, to read the fine print. And they were almost right. But almost is a very large word. I gathered everything. With Chloe's help I got a clean copy of the real Hargrove purchase agreement that Brian had assembled. I got the emails. Chloe found a chain between her father and the developer going back 4 months. 4 months of planning, while he smiled at me across that booth. And I learned the rest of the truth from those emails. The part that made me ache, even through my anger. Brian was in debt. Deep. He'd poured money into some investment that collapsed. Money he didn't have. And he owed people, and the payments were coming due. He needed the sale to close, and he needed it fast. Because the day the diner sold was the day he could pay back what he owed. That was why the rush. That was why Friday. My son wasn't selling our life's work out of cruelty. He was doing it out of desperation. And somehow that was worse. Because it meant he had looked at his drowning self, and decided his mother was the easiest thing to climb over. Marcus, when I told him, just nodded slowly. Like a man who'd been waiting for it. "Whatever you need, Miss Lillian," he said. I saw that developer out back with Brian, with my own eyes. "I'll say so to anyone. To his face, if you want." I did want. I wanted it said to his face. They had planned to do this quietly. In my kitchen, with a notary and a smile. So I decided that if the truth was going to come out, it would come out in the same place the lie had started. So I let Friday come. They arrived at my house at 4 o'clock. All of them, just as Brian had arranged. Brian with his folder and his easy smile. Stephanie in a nice dress, already looking like a woman about to come into money. And a polite young notary with a stamp and a tired briefcase, who had no idea what he'd walked into. Chloe came too, and stood by me. And a few minutes after they sat down, Marcus knocked on my back door. I let him in, and he stood quietly in the kitchen doorway with his arms crossed. Brian frowned at him but said nothing. He spread the renovation folder on my dining table and uncapped the pen. The same pen. And he slid it toward me. "Okay, Mom," he said warmly. "Let's just get this done, so you can stop worrying. Right here." And he peeled back the pages, to that little arrow sticker. "Sign here, Mom." I did not pick up the pen. Instead, I reached into the drawer of my sideboard. And I took out a second folder. And I laid it on the table, next to his. It was the real purchase agreement. The clean copy, with Hargrove Development across the top, and that enormous number in plain sight. The room went very quiet. "Brian," I said. "Before I sign anything, I'd like you to read one line out loud. For everyone. It's on page 9 of the papers you brought me. The line that starts, transfer of title and premises. Go ahead, honey. Read it to me." He looked at the folder. He looked at me. And the color went out of his face, the way it used to when he was a little boy who'd broken something and knew I'd already found the pieces. "Mom," he said. "It's not, that's just standard language, it says you're selling the diner, Brian." My voice did not shake. "To Hargrove Development. For more money than your father and I made in our whole lives. It says the building and the land go to them, free and clear. And you told me it was failing. You told me to sign it without reading it. You stuck a little arrow on the page, so your tired old mother would just put her name down and never know." Stephanie's voice came in sharp. "Lillian, you're confused. This is exactly what we were worried about." "I'm not confused, Stephanie." I turned to her. I called Hargrove myself. I read every page. I have the emails between Brian and the developer, going back 4 months. And I have Marcus, who watched the two of them meet behind my diner with his own eyes. Marcus nodded once, from the doorway. So please don't tell me I'm confused. I've never seen anything more clearly in my life. The notary was already quietly putting his stamp back in his briefcase. And then Brian broke. He put his head down. And when he looked up, his eyes were wet. And he said the thing I will carry with me for the rest of my days. I needed it, Mom. I'm in trouble. Real trouble. I owe people, and I didn't know what else to do. I figured the diner was just going to close someday anyway, and you'd never have to know it was a sale instead of a renovation. I was going to take care of you. I didn't think you'd ever have to know. I didn't think you'd ever have to know. As if the not knowing were a kindness. As if stealing the roof off my life while I slept would have been fine, as long as I never woke up. He hadn't planned to spare me pain. He'd planned to spare himself the sight of mine. You didn't think I'd have to know, I said quietly, because you didn't think of me at all. You thought of a signature. That's all I was to you in this. A line on a page. He had nothing to say to that. Neither of them did. What happened after came quickly. The way it does, once the truth is finally in the open. Because nothing had ever been signed, there was nothing to fight. Ms. Reyes had told me the simple truth: as long as I didn't sign, there was no sale. So I didn't. The Hargrove deal had no owner's signature, and never would. Within a week, it simply died on the vine. The developer moved on to some other corner. And with Ms. Reyes's help, I formally and permanently took away every bit of authority Brian had ever had over the diner's books, its accounts, and its name. He would never again be able to act for Marsh's in any way. Walter's wall held. The gate stayed shut. All it had ever needed was for me to not hand over the key. And at last, I hadn't. Ms. Reyes asked me, gently, whether I wanted to come after Brian for what he had tried to do. There were words for it, she said. Fraud was one of them. I could make his life very difficult. I thought about it for a long time. I thought about a little boy doing his homework in the back booth, while Walter flipped burgers and sang to the radio. I thought about how Walter would have wanted me to be strong. But not cruel. And I made my choice. I did not pursue him in the courts. But I did not rescue him from his debts with my diner, either. Which is what he had really been counting on. Instead, I sat him down, sober, both of us, no folders, no pens, and I told him I would help him find his own way out of the hole he'd dug. A little at a time. On the condition that he never again come near the deed to that building, or lie to my face. He wept. He agreed. Whether he meant it, only time will tell. He is still my son, and I have not stopped loving him. Even now. Even after all of it. But I will never again mistake his smile for the truth. And I will never again let him hold a pen over my name. Stephanie barely speaks to me now. I find I don't mind. The one who saved me, in the end, was the youngest of us. Chloe. So I have started teaching her. She comes in early now, and learns the books, the real ones, and the vendors, and how to run a Saturday rush without losing her head. She loves Marsh's the way Walter and I loved it. Like it's a living thing, and not just a building. And one day, when I'm gone, it will be hers. I've put that in writing, properly, with Ms. Reyes. The deed, when my time comes, goes to the girl who told me the truth. Marsh's diner is still open. The booths still fill at lunch. We ran out of pie again last Thursday. And behind the counter, on the hook where it has always hung, is Walter's old apron. The one I took down for a while, when the grief was too sharp. And put back up, the day the Hargrove deal died. I like to think he'd be proud of me. I like to think he's still here. Somewhere in the smell of the morning griddle. In the bottom drawer of my sideboard, I keep one thing. The developer's purchase agreement. Unsigned. I never threw it away. I keep it to remind myself of how close I came. And of what saved me. Not money. Not a lawyer, though Ms. Reyes was a blessing. Not even Walter's careful planning, in the end. What saved me was the simplest thing in the world. I read the page. And I did not sign my name. They needed one signature to take everything I had. And it turned out, that one signature was the one thing in all the world that no one could take from me. They could only ask. And at last, I had the sense to say no.